So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we are going to be making a return to the heartlands of Arnor as we play a battle on the Cardolan outpost, or watch one anyway. I do wonder if this could pass off as THARBAD, to be honest with you. I think THARBAD was on a river or near to one. But regardless, this map is of course called the Cardolan Outpost, and it is going to be a 3v5 siege today where the joint forces of Arnor try to hold back the tide of darkness that is upon them. So we'll go through the attacking armies first and foremost. We'll try to go through a little bit more quickly because I think the attacking armies are mostly going to have fairly similar things to offer between them. Starting off with Grizzly Fox, who's going to be playing as Rhudaur, a bit of a personal favourite of mine. I do quite like playing as Rhudaur. I like the options that they have, and of course it's quite thematic that they are going to be facing off against their Arnorian brethren. Some Dunmen here, some Dunmen spearmen, and in and amongst them we can see the Witch Realm enslavers just in behind, as well as some Rhudaur marksmen, Arthedain pikemen, Ettenmoor's troll hunters, some Rhudaur swordsmen in and amongst the Arthedain berserkers, and some cavalry as well in the Coldfell maidens, who of course are good at hunting down other cavalry units with their javelins and of course their spears in melee. And that's pretty much it for Rhudaur. So pretty much what you'd expect, a lot of lightly armoured troops, a few higher end troops that have a bit better armour, but for the most part obviously a more lightly armoured horde with the focus around dealing a little bit more damage. Get Wrecked is going to be playing as a force from the Misty Mountains, some Mountaineer coast up here with the men of Rhudaur, and then just in front we can see some elites here at the back of his formation, the Goblin King's bodyguard, which is where Azog is going to be stationed, some cave troll drummers and some Drake broodlings actually just in behind, as well as some cave trolls. So lots of the monstrous units that the Misty Mountains have available to them, which probably means they have less to spend on their front line. The crossbows as well don't come too cheaply, especially in comparison to the archers. And yeah, heavy goblin spears and a lot of heavy goblin infantry with a bit of black Uruk support as well. So mostly heavy goblins in the middle, with some of the monsters and some of the crossbow support as well, just in and around them, and with the black Uruks and heavy goblin spears interspersed throughout for a little bit higher quality, but pretty much what you expect from the Misty Mountains and most orcs, to be honest with you. Front loading on the numbers, and then the supporting units that are around them offer a little bit more in terms of damage. Then we have MP Beckamy, who's going to be playing as Dunland, so some Riders of Orthanc here. The Orthanc units for Dunland are actually very, very good, to be honest with you. It's the only thing they really have going for them as a faction. They're not intended to be all that balanced, but the good thing about Dunland is, I suppose, you're forced into going for an extremely numbers-heavy approach, which is often actually to the benefit of your allies when you play as Dunland, especially on the attack in a situation like this. And the Riders of Orthanc just tie things together. Mounted crossbowmen, of course, all the benefits of crossbows with the additional benefits of being quick. Dunman spearmen in amongst them, some Dunlanding veterans, so the Savage Hillmen going to be the first wave in. Half-Orc Baneguard with the AP, and we also have some Spears of Orthanc here, which of course the dismounted variant, but no less deadly on foot, I have to say. Then we have Mighty Mirko, who's playing as Angmar. Angmar, of course, very well known for their brute force approach to most situations, which should stand in pretty good stead here. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, of course, are the hand-thrown projectile unit that they have, which are also good in melee. No armour upgrade here, though, so that will only heighten their weakness to arrows. They'll probably be sent in a little later, as will the Witch Realm Pikemen, very heavily armoured with pikes, even without the armour upgrade that they have. But even so, you don't want to be sending unshielded units in first in a siege like this, where the defenders are clearly going to have a lot of range support. Blackwatch Legion at the front, very heavily shielded in comparison, and obviously good at pushing through lines, as are to a lesser extent the Gundabad Guard, but of course they're a little bit more versatile in what they can accomplish, being their anti-cavalry because of their spears. Angmar Halberds, more Gundabad Guard, and there's some Hammer Guard and Trolls, and even the Witches, of course, at the back from Mighty Mirko. So again, more quality from Angmar. Generally speaking, it's more popular to play Angmar this way than go for the classic Horde with some quality from the other Orc factions. I think with Angmar it's a little bit more, most players tend to favour going for higher quality even when they're on the attack in a siege such as this. And finally we have Pharaoh, who's playing as the final army, another Rhudaur force, some Dunman spearmen at the front, a long line of Rhudaur swordsmen in loose formation, which they're nothing too special, but they certainly get the job done as far as basic infantry goes. A catapult, which is always going to be useful in a siege, of course. Some pikes interspersed throughout as well, and also some Witch Realm enslavers here at the back. Of course, Rhudaur have got a lot of units that can hide, and I'd imagine that's the case here with Trollshore Axe Throwers, Arthedain Rangers most likely, and probably some Black Walls in there too. Now for the defenders, starting off with the force here in the north, who's going to be having to hold these bridges. We have MSQ2, who's going to be playing as Arthedain, one of the two Arthedain armies trying to defend their homeland. Warns of the North with their AP missiles, probably less useful against Rhudaur actually, and should probably be saved for some of the deadlier forces from Angmar. Some Knights of Annuminus are hidden in there, as well as the Royal Courthouse Armlathe. You can see their tooltip showing up. So 2 very deadly cavalry units, the Knights of Annuminus in particular. The upgraded, well, pikemen. There are Evendim spearmen in there as well. You can actually, Arthedain pikemen are here. The armour upgrade will help them a little bit, but they're going to have to rely on the support of the Evendim spears so they don't get shredded by ranged support. The Numinous Gate Guards, of course, are just the next level up from Arthedain pikemen, with a morale buffing effect as well. But a lot of his army is hidden, a lot of cheaper spears as well as some higher end cavalry. I'd imagine there's rangers around here on display for all of the defending factions, to be honest with you. There's also a unit he accidentally left behind, I assume, in the shape of the dismounted Knights of Annuminus, so they'll probably be scrambling their way forwards. And a trebuchet piece, which is probably going to go back towards the more central area of the defence, because I imagine the north is going to be lost at some point, and they'll have to base their defence a little bit more around more favourable ground. In the middle we have a Lalan, who is the one who sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to him, and he is going to be playing as what could be seen as the lesser of the 2 good aligned kingdoms from Cardolan, from Arnor I should say, and that is Cardolan, of course. Hearthguard of Amon, Sul and Menotar Roman Gatekeepers, however, would beg to differ with that. A very sturdy place to put your general is the Hearthguard, but one of the real dangers of Cardolan is, of course, their crossbows and how tough they are to skirmish with, and the Menotar Roman Gatekeeper is the ultimate expression of that, especially with the armour upgrade here. Really, really good damage dealers, but you do want to set them up against the right target. Maybe the hordes from Dunland might not be that. Mercenary Guildsmen, they are an arm-piercing line infantry unit, which, you know, considering that Mercenary's low morale is not really all that different from Cardolan's low morale in general, there is a reason to pick the Mercenary Guildsmen for Cardolan in comparison to Khazad-dûm. But AP, going to be useful, more useful against some of the attackers than others once again. Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, pretty much the opposite. They're a little bit higher quality as an actual unit, but of course they do lack that AP that the Mercenaries carry. Minhiriath Spears, so again just a bit of spear support, just to solidify that line a little bit. More Men-at-Arms, so a lot of the Minhiriath units actually, and of course the Sharpshooters who pull out those maces in melee and are really very solid all round. There's really no reason to ever not bring the Sharpshooters, to be honest with you. There's some Dunedain Rangers in there as well. Completely unsurprising to see Dunedain Rangers in a siege like this. More Menotar Roman Gatekeepers, Wardens of Tirn Gorthad here at the back, more Mercs. Tharbad Warhammers, 2 units of Dunedain Captains. I believe actually this is by intent now. I don't think you go into the red limit by having 2 Dunedain Captains, but that's not really game breaking, to be honest with you, because they were always a step behind the other sort of really high-end human sword master units anyway. They weren't really a patch on something like the Haven Guard, for example. So having 2 is very useful, don't get me wrong, especially against hordes of low-quality stuff from Misty Mountains and Dunland, but it's not game breaking by any means. Merc crossbows as well, so even more crossbow punch here, so a lot of crossbows from Cardolan, which is good because it does make up for one area which perhaps Arthedain lack, but Arthedain of course have got strengths in other ways. Commander Gervais playing as Arthedain. He's got some Arthedain marksmen on the walls already. He's got some Wardens of the North as well, some hidden units including Dunedain Trollslayers, big fan of them. Dismounted Fornos to Rain Knights, Dunedain Peacekeepers, Arthedain Pikemen, Grey Company are hidden in there, fully upgraded Arthedain and Men-at-Arms, so maybe a little bit more quality. He still has some of the lower tier Evendim over here, but perhaps a little bit more of a quality focus than MSQ2 in the north, which is good. It's good to have that juxtaposition, I suppose, and it'll be interesting to see how this works out. I like the way the defenders have built their armies, but we'll see how well they're used, because it's all to do in a 5v3, of course. So without further ado, let's begin. And time will also tell how quickly the attackers move in. In fact, I think I will make a little bit of a cut here, because it's quite likely, I think, that they'll wait for the Rhudaur armies out wide to get down here first before they start to cross the river. So I will make a cut here, and we'll rejoin when the battle is underway. So here we go, the trebuchet is firing onto the forces of Angmar that are crossing this rather rickety looking bridge over here, and a square shot into the Blackwatch Legion is definitely something to go for, because if you can deny them their numbers, they have much less pushing power than they otherwise would, and of course that's definitely the sort of thing which will come into play later on. Interesting that Mighty Mirko is leading the way with them. They're very heavily shielded and armoured, so maybe it will definitely absorb more punishment from Arthedain skirmishes than most of Angmar's roster will. But having said that, against something like these Dunedain Rangers from the Arthedain player, or one of the 2 Arthedain players anyway, it will still have an impact over the long haul. So I would imagine we're going to start off with a bit of a skirmish phase here. Actually, I think this is maybe not all that desirable from an attacking point of view. I mean, you can see these Goblin Infantry, not really too much to lose here. You do actually have to pay a little bit of money for them now, but it's really a pittance, to be honest with you. They're still going to get a lot of value very, very easily. Mercenary Crossbowmen are moving forward, and you can actually see as well the Snaga Archers have reared their ugly heads onto the bridge, and they're actually going after the Dunland Rangers and Merc crossbows, two very good targets for lower tier archers like the Snaga actually to go after. Neither of those two units stand up too well to sustained arrow fire, and the Snaga archers can potentially get massive value off here. The Grey Company are also moving in, but again, another unit which doesn't necessarily do all that well under arrow fire. Now, to be fair, with two units of what is effectively Rangers firing in here, the Snaga will melt very quickly, as you can see, but it's really worth using Ranger ammunition. I mean, it is now, because actually Mighty Mirko, in a rather unfortunate move, actually, has decided to pull his Blackwatch Legion back, so he lost his bottle, and actually, as a result, the Blackwatch Legion have turned their backs on the Rangers, and so the main defence they had against those arrows, their huge shield value from the front, is completely gone when you turn your backs on archers like that, and that's why the Blackwatch Legion have taken so much damage so quickly at the hands of those Rangers there. So what actually could have been quite a cost-effective engagement there, with the Blackwatch Legion planting their shields in front of those Ranger volleys and absorbing quite a lot of the damage they could do, has actually turned into a bit of a win, to be honest, for you, for the defenders. And normally I wouldn't recommend going after Snaga archers with your valuable Rangers, but I suppose in this situation, considering all of the defenders are going to have access to Dunland Rangers, it's not all that big of a deal. Meanwhile, the artillery from the other side of the river, the Rhudaur catapult, managing to do some minor damage here to the Minhiriath spears. I wouldn't be going after the Minhiriath spears if I were him. They're in loose formation anyway. I suppose, considering how widespread Cardolan are, I mean, you're going to hit, but you're not going to do terrible damage. This will add up eventually, but will it really pay for itself? We shall see. Merc Guildsmen are on the front line. They're a little bit more densely packed, to be honest with you. You could shoot down the line. You're more likely to inflict a fairly telling blow on the Merc Guildsmen or the men-at-arms over here. Goblin infantry are creeping ever further forwards. Unit of Dunman spearmen coming forward as well. So initially, certainly, the assault is going to be made up of mainly really poor quality units, which no one is really going to want to use their ammunition on. But Arthedain archers, I think, armour upgraded here with their metal shoulder guards and their actual helms. They also don't have shorts, they have more of a skirt on, to be honest with you, but we'll ignore that for now. It's definitely an improvement armour-wise from their standard model anyway. Arthedain archers, though, the lowest tier unit that Arthedain can bring, this is actually the unit that they won't mind using the ammunition of into these lower quality units, because it will, at the very least, give that support to their front line. But it is interesting here. I like the way the attackers are approaching this, because they can get their own archers in, and if it's only Arthedain archers that are on the front line here, skirmishing with the Rhudaur marksmen, the attackers actually stand a pretty decent chance of winning the skirmish fight. There's some Gwathlo trackers from Dunland moving in as well. So again, none of these archers are particularly fantastic, but they can overwhelm the Arthedain archers as long as there's only one of them. With two, the Arthedain archers are pretty decent as far as militia archers go at soaking up punishment as well with that armour upgrade. They're shielded. Definitely a very cost-effective unit. The Arthedain in general mean that Arthedain have got arguably one of the better lower tier sort of options in the game, especially when you combine them with the rest of the Arthedain army. Definitely a very solid and numerous core from which you can build. Very player-friendly faction to play, I think, Arthedain. Meanwhile, these Arthedain marksmen are getting into position. These Snaga archers, there's only 18 of them. I mean, they will continue to slowly fire. I mean, if the Royal Court of House Armlaith do decide to cross the bridge, it's going to be very punishing for the Snaga, and here you can see that MSQ2 is tired of this little annoyance, and he's going to try and break them. Whether they're going to get there in time ahead of the Blackwatch Legion remains to be seen. But, I mean, even the Blackwatch Legion, I mean, to be fair, I think Cavalry struggles a little bit to get up to charge speed on a bridge. You can see here the Snaga have been engaged by the heavy riders from Arthedain, which this should certainly be enough to break them, and yeah, it is. So they won't be coming back, and this, of course, is a good opportunity for the Royal Court to get away. They definitely need to get away, because if they do get pulled down into a pit fight with the Blackwatch Legion, that's not going to go too well for them. They're probably going to lose a couple of riders here, to be honest with you, even their multiple. Well, no, those big maces didn't really connect with any of those Arthedain riders, but here you can see the classic Medieval 2 bridge pathfinding in full effect. Still not a full melee engagement just yet. I think, you know, with all of the skirmish support they've got in place, I think the attackers have got the infrastructure now to charge in and actually start putting some real pressure on this defence over here. It's scary, to be sure, but I mean, even if they do end up using their rangers on you early on, that's not really such a problem for you. It's later on where rangers can prove to be a real thorn in your side if you haven't forced them to use their ammunition yet. And so the defenders will be hoping that they can just sort of sit here as they are. Ooh, Commander Gervais is using his rangers now. He's firing into Snaga skirmishes and Rhudaur marksmen. I mean, 1 or 2 volleys I think is okay. But again, like rangers, you do need to be very careful with how you use ammunition. I've seen many times in the past a defence which, technically speaking, with how they played, they should have won. The only thing they did wrong was poor conservation of resources. And that could be a deciding factor again if they decide to dump all their, or a vast majority of their ranger ammo into low quality trash early in the fight. Meanwhile, still the back and forth over on this bridge over here. Dunland Troll Slayers are moving forward now. Once again, Mighty Mirko has sent forward his Blackwatch Legion, trying to zone out the cavalry, but MSQ2 is on station and the Dunland Troll Slayers pulling out those two-handed axes. This is going to be the end of the Blackwatch Legion. They've been caught in melee on the bridge by the Dunland Troll Slayers, and this is exactly the sort of opponent that the Troll Slayers are really, really solid against. Breaking the Blackwatch Legion, because they are a higher tier, more expensive unit, is going to be quite difficult for the Troll Slayers, and they don't want to chase too far. While they are a very resilient unit, they still, like most Dunedain, don't want to be caught cold against archers, even the low quality offerings from a faction such as Angmar. One thing with regards to my graphics, interestingly enough, which I wish wasn't the case, actually the water quality I have to have on lowest. Because if I turn it on to shader 2 and have the reflectors on, that's the thing which causes havoc with reshade. It's something that I've noticed in the last couple of days while I've been fiddling around with it. Having my reshade settings on is a problem when I go for the reflective water and the shadows and which is kind of weird, to be honest with you. So it's kind of a trade-off. Do I want nice water and shadows, or do I want the higher quality colours and look of the units and so on? I think this way round is better, but it's a debate that can be had. Meanwhile, the first melee engagement happening over here. Interesting, these Dunlanding veterans getting into the faces of these mercenary guildsmen. The AP not going to be terribly useful against the Dunlanders. They have basic chainmail on, but it's not exactly heavy plate that the maces will be good at dealing with. But Dunlanding veterans getting in here. Bit of support from the Snaga coming in, but there is some arrow fire coming from behind the front line, dealing with them. Beauty of the Snaga is, even if they do just succeed in getting shot up, they've still fulfilled a good amount of their potential. Dunedain Rangers still being hunted by the attackers. Commander Gervais needs to get his Dunedain Rangers out of here, to be honest with you. They're just serving as a target for all of the attacking archers which are in position supporting. You can see some of these Dunlanders have actually managed to squeak their way in behind enemy lines. They're not going to get very far. They're definitely going to break before they achieve anything of note. But I mean, this part of the line is being overloaded. So something needs to give here. They need to deal with this one unit of Dunlanding veterans a little bit more comprehensively than they're currently doing. Meanwhile, Minhiriath's sharpshooters being targeted. Lucky only one of them died. Grazing blow on the Ebendim archers as well, but Pharaoh going after them. Meanwhile, interesting to see the trolls on station here. I mean, the clue is in the name here. The Dunedain Troll Slayers are probably not best countered by trolls. But having said that, the Dunedain Troll Slayers will still lose in the long run against Witch Realm Hammerguard. Troll Slayers are all well and good, but Hammerguard are a completely different proposition. And the Troll Slayers, if they're going to win that fight, they definitely need to make liberal use of their javelins first and foremost, which of course they didn't do in this dense fight on the bridge. There's a bit of support coming in from the Warns of the North, to be fair. With those AP arrows, actually, the result of that fight might be a little bit different. And they're definitely going to take some pretty hefty losses as they retreat there. Interesting engagement that. Meanwhile, more and more pressure being applied to this front line. Heavy Goblin infantry is on the front line and wavering, actually. But yeah, a little bit of a... Again, only one unit of Dunlanding veterans has succeeded in essentially fracturing the defending front line, which is not what you want as the defenders. You definitely want to keep things nice and organised, keep your front line fighting, and allow your supporting units, like the sharpshooters and the rangers, like Cardolan and Arthedain put together with their rangers, their crossbows, their javelins, all that good stuff. They have between them a truly devastating ranged core. And if you can take advantage of that in a situation like this, you should go on to win the battle, really. But all that hinges on you constructing your front line well, because if it's compromised and there's gaps appearing, when things get a little bit more disorganised, Cardolan in particular will start to suffer because of their low morale, but even Arthedain tend to go for more pike-heavy builds. And of course, when things get chaotic, pikes are not necessarily the best weapon to have in your hands. Mountain Orc Berserkers, very weak to arrow fire, of course, but also pretty damaging against most of the basic infantry. that they're going to be facing off against from Cardolan and Arthedain today. They are taking damage, but not a huge amount, as Arthedain marksmen a little bit inaccurate, but fire arrows trying to break some of the lower tier units, and they're succeeding in doing that. One thing I will say about this assault, they have started to push in now in greater numbers, but not in great enough numbers. They needed to stand forward a little bit more in terms of their basic units, but also a little bit more quality. I mean, the troll drummers are here, but when you're under this much pressure and the unit quality is this low, even the troll drummers will not be enough to prevent you from breaking. Again, it's a delicate balancing act for the attackers, I do get that. Because if you commit too much, that's going to just draw the ire of all the crossbows and rangers that the defenders have to offer, and they are dumping a good amount of ammunition into a force which is not necessarily all that high quality. I mean, there are Angmar's troll hunters here which will probably be worth going after, but other than that, there's not a huge amount on this front line, which is cause for concern. Rhudaur swordsman here, shields pointing the right way, but those are crossbow bolts coming in, not so easily blocked. More flaming arrows. I like the inclusion actually of the flaming arrows from MSQ2's Arthedain marksman over there. Already there are morale issues for the attackers, and just giving them that extra little push should be enough to send some of the lower quality units routing off, depriving the attackers of one of their greatest assets in this battle, which is going to be sheer force of numbers. All of the attacking forces on display, except really for Angmar, are most well known for their ability to swarm. Even Angmar can do it, but generally speaking they go for a little bit more quality. But already they've lost some decent units. I mean, you know, those Blackwatch Legion, very nice asset to have potentially later on. Lost them, taken a bit of damage as well to the Witchram Hammers. In return, they have done some superficial damage to Arthedain, but nothing really too telling. While Dunland and Rhudaur marching together. Those are Rhudaur axemen, I think I just saw. Interesting to see them get committed, because they're very weak to arrows as well. Obviously, again, damaging. Their damage will be very useful on the front line, but how long they're actually going to be there remains to be seen. Spears of Orthanc as well, so maybe a little bit more pressure started to come in. They do need to keep this assault going. Those Angmar's troll hunters taking point-blank shots from the Minhiriath sharpshooters. So yeah, Cardolan and Arthedain now pouring in a lot of deadly... Is that the Trebuchet? I think that was MSQ2's Trebuchet, which managed to get a nice shot into the belly of the beast, as it were. More heavy goblins being committed forward. Javelins and arrows flying forward from the attacking side as well, trying to wear down the defence. Arthedain men-at-arms on the front line, out of ammunition. Evandim archers trying to patch up the line as well, but patience is the name of the game here for the attackers. Attrition and trying to wear the enemy down is the best way to deal with this when you have these compositions. Early on, the engagements will go the way of the defenders, but as the battle continues, they're going to have less and less of an ability to do that, and with good catapult shots like that, they're building a good base that they can build on in the future of this battle. Another unit of heavy goblin infantry pushing in, again a huge amount of numbers. Heavy goblin infantry are low tier, certainly, below 400 florins for a unit of them, but the numbers that they offer here should be pretty decent. It's not as if they're up against overwhelming force either. It's mostly just sort of standard sword and board infantry from the Western Kingdoms. Some sharpshooters closing in melee. The AP not going to be all that... Well, I suppose it will actually be useful against the heavy goblins to an extent, but not so much against Rhudaur. In fact, the Rhudaur axemen are here now. Some trolls coming in. Is the line thin enough to try and break it with trolls? I mean, kind of. I mean, the heavy goblins, again, finding a gap. Get wrecked with some good awareness there. And now the cave trolls could follow through, so the question now is, how do they deal with this? Dunland spearmen thinking about attacking across, but with only one unit there, they're not really going to... alone, they're not going to be able to achieve anything against an Arthedain force, which is still very much active over here. Dunland Rangers, are they going to fire? It's a very densely packed formation of Dunman spears. I mean, Angmar's troll hunters, a bit more of a genuine attack coming across the bridge now from Rhudaur. Over here in the middle, Angmar still hanging back, having learnt their lesson to an extent. Only one Snaga is perpetually routing. But Rhudaur starting to put pressure on the north is also a good sign, actually, I think, for the attackers. Because they're starting to actually make some inroads here in this main choke point. So if they start putting pressure, especially in the far north, and then maybe Angmar follows through last, you'll start to see the defenders become a little bit stretched, maybe panic a little bit and try and retreat before it would be the optimum time to do so. Snaga skirmishers taking damage, those Dunland spearmen taking a lot of damage as well. Dunedain rangers from Dunland firing in. So at this point, I mean, all of the defenders at this point are using their rangers to some extent. And it's still relatively early in the fight. Not a huge amount of quality has been sent forward. Angmar have. I mean, the trolls are here, but generally speaking, you don't really deal with trolls with ranged units. Dunedain rangers as well from Commander Gervais moving in, so that's a sign they're out of ammunition. Again, in a match like this, you would expect your rangers to get upwards of 400 kills. I don't believe Commander Gervais will have achieved that with his rangers at this point. It might be near, but again, it's on lower end targets as well. Still a reasonably solid front line. I mean, there's still a lot of Cardolan's units here. They're trying to pull the pikemen back, so maybe the beginnings of a planned retreat here. And what's going on here in the north? Yeah, definitely a retreat. You can see MSQ2. I think he sees which way the wind is blowing at this point. He sees that Rhudaur are putting pressure on him. He sees the broodlings. He knows he's not going to be able to hold against Angmar as well if they decide to start crossing, which they should at this point. They're wide open to do so. So he's going to start a phased retreat through the hills and back to the rear of the settlement. Meanwhile, these Dunlanders, or Dunman, as they cross, they're getting intercepted by the fully upgraded Evendim spears. And it's definitely proving to be a bit of a slog here for Rhudaur, but they're doing the right thing, even if they do take losses here. It is prompting Arthedain to begin a retreat. The Dunedain Rangers are firing in. I mean, that's probably a worthwhile target to go after. There's some decent quality units in there. You're going to get some kills on some trash as well. All is good. Meanwhile, Gwathlo trackers, I mean, they have stabilised here. I mean, the heavy goblin infantry are never really going to be able to solidify the gains that they make. The trolls tried to, but they didn't have any more numerous infantry they could keep funneling in here, so the defenders have been able to stabilise. Mormin Hiriath are over here. The Dunedain Rangers still fighting hard. The pikes have returned, so I think actually over here, the Grey Company also firing in. They feel as though they can continue to hold this ground, and they should. They're vindicated in that belief, because again, like, there's more units coming forward. Not really in overwhelming numbers yet. I mean, now is the time I think the attackers start to need to start thinking about more pressure. I think they need to start putting the defenders under the cosh a little bit more, because they've already baited out a lot of high value ammunition from their foe, but at this point they run the risk of just running out of steam. It's still early days in this battle, but these things can have an impact later on. If you start to lose the overwhelming numbers advantage you have with these factions that are on display for the attackers, then Arthedain and Cardolan are going to feel very confident going into the late game. Arthedain, well, Commander Gervais's army, I should say, has still got the really nice backbone of higher tier infantry units like the dismounted Fornoster Ray Knights and the Dunedain Peacekeepers, as well as obviously stuff from Cardolan like the THARBAD Warhammers, the Dunedain Captains. You need to leave yourself the tools in the late game, the attackers, to deal with them, but you do that by being more aggressive, not less. Another nice hit there from the catapult. Hearthguard of Amon Sul have got a very large effect on their morale boosting capabilities. So this front line for Cardolan is not really suffering too badly from the morale effects. Obviously catapults are going to cause very low strength units like that to break off, but that's to be expected really. Meanwhile, and here you can see the mounted units now coming across, the Grey Company getting into a position. Dunedain Trollslayers are there as well, but it's very difficult to stop the Drake Broodlings once they get rolling, but they're taking a lot of damage here. An awful lot of damage actually, so I can see what the idea here was. I mean, Angmar should really be crossing at this point. I think maybe he's sort of lost his confidence a little bit after having his nose bloodied in the earlier phases of this battle, but now is when his allies need him to cross, because Rhudaur have sort of run up against a bit of a wall here. Arthedain blocking their progress quite effectively with some basic units, and also Rhudaur have got a lot of their other strengths being funneled to other areas of the battle. But also the fight on the front line is progressing, but it's kind of in a neutral sense. No one's really gained or lost too heavily from that fight yet. Angmar is the one that can force the issue in this battle now, which is why I think Arthedain have already sort of preemptively retreated, because they know as soon as Angmar do that, they're kind of doomed if they don't. So definitely a good decision there, I think. Ahead of time by MSQ2, Gwathlo trackers firing away, shooting into Lalande's Dunedain Rangers. So he still should have some ranger ammunition left. Meanwhile, mercenary crossmen just sort of waiting up on the hills upon their mounts. They're taking hits now though. As damaging as any crossbow on foot, in spite of the fact they wield more of a hand crossbow than an arbalest. Mountaineer at Coast on the front line as well. Mountaineer at Coast are a little bit more of a serious unit as well. A very different proposition to face down than the heavy goblin infantry the defenders have been slaughtering up till this point. Still a few axemen in there, not very many at all though. Dunland spearmen struggling. The drummers have been committed. I actually think that's a bit of a mistake from getting wrecked. Committing the drummers is something you should only do really in desperation, because their benefit as a morale battery is so much more than they're able to lay down in melee. They're not good in melee at all, really. In comes some Minhiriath sharpshooters. This one troll is almost definitely going to fall as a result, and yet, as the infantry just rolls over him, no issues whatsoever with that. So yeah, primarily Cardolan on the front line actually holding at this point, and yeah, I mean you can see now at this point, heavy goblin spears with their AP, Trollshore axe throwers in support, Black Uruks are moving forward again, the Misty Mountains committing forward some better stuff. Cardolan's morale is starting to look a little bit more flimsy. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? Well, I mean, these Dunedain Trollslayers are holding up this entire Angmar force on its own, but it is definitely a temporary measure. I can see why he's doing it, because a big blob leaves a big blob for the Grey Company to shoot into. I mean, I didn't see those Trollslayers use their javelins at all in this battle, which, I mean, unorthodox way to use them, but I wouldn't say it's a bad one. These trolls have managed to get through. The trolls will do quite well in melee against the Grey Company and Merc crossbows, of course, but they'll do pretty badly, actually, against the heavy swordsmen. The dismounted Fornost Array Knights should be able to drag them down. But unfortunately for the Fornost Array Knights, the trolls are pretty quickly, I think, going to get support. There's only 6 Troll Slayers remaining, as those body-piercing projectiles continue to find their way into the Angmar blob. Well-managed defence so far. Some dismounted Fornost Array Knights over here as well, so no wonder Rhudaur have been struggling. They've been sending forward basic units, but the heavy swordsmen from Arthedain here going to be too strong for basic Rhudaur swordsmen by far. There is support from Rhudaur, but again, Rhudaur's force has been... they've been engaging, but they haven't really been pushing. Angmar really need to push at this point. It's kind of a necessity. Here are the trolls. They're going to get skewered, I think, by the Royal Court of House Armlaith, although actually... unfortunately there, the charge wasn't really... I mean, it's 2 different players with these 2 units. The charge, however, primarily was absorbed by their own unit, so none of the trolls really ended up dying as a result. You need to cycle those House Armlaith nobles out of there. And, of course, Grey Company charging in, actually charging into the right side and connecting, but of course, Horse Archers, their charge is far less scary than a unit of Lancers. Meanwhile, the front line has collapsed in the off time. Blackwold's coming forward with a little bit more punch as well with the Black Uruk. So as soon as the more serious units came forward, there was actually less ammunition on hand to deal with it. We'll see if that remains the case when we go back toward the settlement, which is where this battle is inevitably heading towards. The Arthedain forces of MSQ2 managing to make it to the settlement. But yes, now the attackers will be able to cross the river and start thinking about how best to approach attacking the settlement itself. Colfell Maidens still here. I'm actually surprised the Colfell Maidens haven't been committed sooner, but now they have a good opportunity to come to the aid of Angmar, I think. And a pretty good tool to start dealing. Well, there's still Grey Company there, so the Colfell Maidens will probably start getting rinsed by them pretty hard. But yeah, there go the heavy swordsmen. Not sure it was too worthwhile to commit them. They didn't really achieve their goals. I mean, I guess they did drag down the trolls. There's still 6 trolls remaining. We'll see if the Arthedain Cavalry has any more success. Again, kind of a disjointed charge, so didn't really have the impact he wanted. And over here now, Rhudaur starting to really push in, so more of a committal now from the attackers, trying to seize the opportunity that they now have. And the defenders, of course, with the units they've left behind, they're going to lose them all. But now at least they can start thinking about how to shore things up in the settlement, and how best to approach that. So yeah, Reforged javelins revealing themselves, Blackwolds and Slavers back there we already saw, Rangers, Berserkers, hidden units galore from Rhudaur now revealing themselves to cross the river. The trolls taking a few more casualties from the Armlaith Cav, but the Armlaith Cav have also been taking losses. This is going to be interesting. The Knights of Anubis are a very expensive unit. We shall now see if their inclusion was worthwhile. That was a big charge, that. Huge damage there to the Heavy Goblin Spears, and the Coldfell Maidens bore the brunt of their lances as well, but they do need to be microed carefully. They're a Gundabad Guard here. Heavier spears, who will be able to drag the Knights down if they are too lax in micro. This Hammer Guard have taken some losses, but I'm not sure what Angmar still have units across the river for. They need to start crossing everything, I think, at this point. Start really setting things up. There's still a few units actually, actually the Broken Fornos Terrain Knights that are breaking through the ranks of the enemy, which of course is going to mean their demise. Rhudaur marksmen firing away on the retreating cavalry, and they actually have managed to pull down a single knight. Still these trolls back here, these Arthedain marksmen. 16 Royal Courthouse Armleth, they need to start picking up the pace, as one troll is pretty swift as it turns out. He's up to charge speed as well. I think he missed the charge though, so no big concern there. I think this should be the end of the trolls with the knights coming in. No, he managed to slip through. Still going after the Royal Court. Ooh, and has he lost micro on them, I wonder? No, I mean the Coldfell Maidens were chasing the knights, but again, I mean they definitely need to be using their javelins first on the knights. If they're charging into melee, they're not going to stand a chance. The Knights of Anubis are, bar none, I believe, the tankiest units of knights in the game. Heavy armour, massive shield. Still, these trolls live. The charges haven't really connected as of yet. Rhudaur, some Rhudaur marksman, MP Beckamy with his Dunlanders forming things up. Still transitioning all their army across the river, get wrecked with the final remnants of his Misty Mountain host. Getting things across. I mean, yes, it did cost the attackers fairly dearly, but I don't think they'll be all that disappointed with how this went. They managed to push the defenders back, I think, a little bit sooner than the defenders were hoping, judging on how the defenders were approaching the lines. But I think as soon as MSQ2 realised that Rhudaur were attacking him, and if Angmar did decide to move forward, he could do nothing to stop them, I think that was what made the defenders' decision for them. So I can understand why they took the action to do so, but I don't think that was their long-term plan. I think they were hoping to hold the river for a good deal longer than that, but if that was the idea, then MSQ2 shouldn't have been left alone to try and deal with both of these two bridges all on its lonesome. I know that Commander Gervais did send a couple of units up here, but I'm talking about something a little bit more substantial. Of course, if you do that, it does diminish your opportunities to retreat back to the fortress and try and use that as your final stand. So it swings and roundabouts, really. Meanwhile, here in the north, there's still some engagements to be had. What are these Drake Moodlings up to? Still says there's a unit of defending infantry, and I suppose there is. It's breaking Arthedain marksmen though, and they're going to break through the ranks of the enemy. Yeah, they're going to get skewered as they run through. These Guathlo trackers, not exactly well known for their prowess in melee, but routing units, of course, are pretty much a one-hit kill when you connect with them. So how do the attackers handle things from here, I wonder? Let's have a look at what the percentages are. So, yeah, the defenders are ahead, but 6% is not a huge amount. By this point in the battle, I think as the defenders, you'd be hoping that would be closer to 10. But it's a very defensible settlement. Narrow streets, narrow choke points of entry, good places to put your archers and other skirmishers, depending on how much ammunition they have left. But there are several ways in. I believe there are 4 in total. So there's this one at the front, which, yeah, I mean, there is this sort of raised ground, which is going to be pretty nasty for the attackers, but I imagine they're still going to take this route. There's this route in from the side, which is actually a fairly decent place to attack through, I think, because it's more difficult to get skirmishers in to really nicely support the defence there. This one at the back, which is probably the worst place for the attackers to come through, because it's sort of a long corridor where the defenders can line up some skirmishers in good positions. Kind of a similar story with this one here in the top left corner as well. But yeah, nice position for skirmishers there. So I think yeah, from the front of the settlement, and that choke point over there is probably the best ones if you had to pick two, but in an ideal world, of course, you need to try and pressurize every available choke point that you can. That gives you the best opportunity for victory as the attackers gather their forces. Still a large host of orcs, goblins and evil men as they converge upon what I shall call THARBAD for the purposes of the narrative. Moving through the mountains in the north as well, we have Pharaoh's Rhudaur army. Still has a good amount of Arthedain pikemen left. I also saw that he still has his more nasty melee units as well. Trollshaw Axeros are a fantastic supporting unit as the battle goes on as well. Early they can be more easily focused down by plentiful arrows. As the fight goes along, however, that changes somewhat. Arthedain Berserkers as well, Black Wolds. You have to wonder whether or not the defenders have dumped too much of their ammunition into lower end targets, but heading towards the walls here. Arthedain marksmen ready to receive the first ranks of the attacks as they start to spread forward. Mighty Mirko leading the way with its spears, are a little bit further ahead of the main host, but I mean with these anti-cavalry units it does prevent Arthedain perhaps from using some of their really nasty units like the Knights. Where are the Knights, interestingly enough? I mean, they're back here, some Merc crossbows, Royal Court. There go the Knights of Numis. You definitely don't want to bottle them up too early, I don't think. You can try and save them for late on, that is valid, but I mean, you do run the risk of the fact that they might end up just forced into a corner. Gundabad Guard taking some hits. Now in range of a larger blob of Rhudaur and Dunland forces here at the back. Taking some pot shots at them with the marksman. The Minotaur Roman Guardians, I believe, squeezed off a volley into the Gundabad Guard, which are on pikemen moving forward. A good target to go after, like I said, well armoured for pikes, but still the lack of a shield will still hurt them against sustained arrow pressure. Which are on Blackguard, who unlike the Hammer Guard are still healthy. They're a very good unit to have in the late game as well. The Blackguard, time and time again, we've seen how effective they can be. More Black Wolds as well. So quite a lot actually of multiple HP shock infantry that the attackers still have left for them. Which again is all well and good, but as soon as the hit points are gone, they'll fall just like the rest to arrow fire and crossbow fire and javelins. Whether or not they actually have enough left remains to be seen. Arthedain marksmen actually getting a fairly decent side-swiping hit here onto the pikes as they try to gather at the base of the wall. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers moving position. MP Bakami and his Dunland horde going to meet up with Pharaoh and presumably attack via this choke point here. And maybe the rest are going to just carry on from the front. I'm not sure whether they have the full ability to attack from 4 choke points. Maybe they could manage 3, but they'd need to be decisive for that. Quite a lot of these arrows are being buried into the dirt just in front of them. How many are actually connecting, I wonder? A decent amount, but they're not exactly getting a huge amount of kills. There are the Hammer Guard, battered and bruised as they are. Trump Blackguard are there as well. It's a smaller army, I suppose, over here that's attacking from the front. It's mostly going to be Angmar, I think, and what's left of the Misty Mountains, who seem to bear the brunt of the defenders' fury early on. It's mostly going to be evil men, I think, attacking from the hills to the north. We shall see how things develop, I suppose. This would be a bold move from my... Well, I thought he was actually just going to charge right on in with his Butcher on Blackguard then. I thought that would be a very interesting move indeed. I mean, there's a lot of support around here. Peacekeepers themselves are no pushovers, but the real problem would just be overwhelming force that the defenders would immediately apply if they saw something as scary as the Blackguard coming their way, all on their lonesome. Scourge Raiders moving in as well. I mean, Scourge Raiders are a good target to go after for the archers atop the walls, especially without their armour upgrade. They do certainly lack the solidity to stand up to sustained pressure from them. Some Drake Broodlings, crashing through the ranks of their ally. No, they are going to wave off over here, so Grizzly Fox and his Rhudaur force are going to come around here, so I like this. Knights of Innuminus were sort of hovering with intent, but... So that means Angmar's going to lead from the front. They've got a more quality-centric army. One of the Rhudaur forces is going to go around and attack from the south, and then another Rhudaur army backed up by Dunland is going to attack from the north by the looks of things. This is probably where the biggest army is, to be honest, from the north, so again, we'll see if the defenders can divide up their forces accordingly. Here come the Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders, firing in a few volleys through the gap. This is good. Try and wear the defenders down a little bit. They're going after the Minotaur, Roman Gatekeepers. I'm not sure you'll be able to kill off a lot of them with thrown axes like that. You will again. I think the Wardens of Tir Gorthad would actually be the better target here, but again, what do I know? Oof. That artillery shot there from presumably the Trebuchet, and it was very, very narrowly missing the Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders. You can see there some of the hatchets buried in the wall. That is the telltale sound of crossbows as well. So heavy goblin crossbows and Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders, so the attackers very clearly wanting to soften the defenders up before they move in for the kill with their full martial might. That is Cardolan's Dunedain Rangers though, and they will make pretty quick work of Scourge Raiders, especially as densely packed as they are. Any residual kills they get on the crossbows wouldn't go amiss either. Let's see what's going on down here. Looks like we've got some cavalry action happening, or at least some attempted cavalry action. The Knights of Innuminus coming in. There's a few dead men, a few dead Reforged javelins actually, so that was a good catch there from Commander Gervais. But there's a second unit of Knights of Innuminus as well, so there's definitely some cavalry in play still. How well this cavalry can be used remains to be seen. Yeah, there's MSQ2s. I mean, especially if Grizzly Fox decides to move forward, leading the way with his stuff like his pikes and his Attenmore's Troll Hunters. His Dunland Spearmen as well, obviously, are not only disposable, but also have those spears. It's going to be pretty difficult, I think, for that cavalry to be used as effectively as they would like it to be. But that comes down to micro, so we shall soon see. I mean, to be fair, these Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers have taken, after a fair amount of consistent pressure, some pretty decent damage here from the Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders, but the Scourge Raiders at this point are taking a lot of punishment, several of them falling, some of them actually getting back up from that. Wardens of Tir Gorthad have taken some loss as well. I'm surprised actually that Lalan has kept his units just in full view of the Scourge Raiders. I think even by ducking them a little bit further behind cover, I don't think Angmar would have moved forward immediately. I might be wrong about that. Snaga Skirmishes taking a pretty nasty volley there from the Arthedain marksman. Again, more taking hits, getting rid of some more javelins. Now you can see the heavy goblin crossbows taking point blank shots really from the Arthedain marksman. Probably should have come a little bit sooner. Again, heavy goblin crossbows, they are somewhat armoured, but the heavy goblin armour is not as effective as that the Uruk-hai wear. And also, of course, killing off the crossbows, while eventually you'll have to face down their ammunition, the DPS from the crossbows is greatly reduced when you kill more of their number. And I wonder if the same is going to be true of this position in the north. I'll try and use the Spears of Orthanc, who took some damage in their attempt to cross over the river, but they're here now and they're still crossbowmen. And they're going to maybe go after those marksmen. Just a warning shot, as it were. Only one of them actually fell there. Fell almost instantly though. The first bolt that was loosed resulted in a kill, but none of the others did. Mercenary crossbowmen up on the walls. I had a game in Bannerlord where I was playing as the Khazaits and my riders would refuse to dismount even when they were defending on the walls, such as they were. Heavy goblin crossbows are wavering at this point. They're taking damage, and I can't imagine it'll be that much longer before they do break, of course. Heavy goblins not exactly known for their sturdiness. The Misty Mountains overall, a big deal is made of Cardolan's low morale, but I think that's just because in comparison to the other kingdoms of men, whose morale is pretty decent, it's lower, but the Misty Mountains morale is low among their rank and file. Very low indeed. You can see here they're moving out wide here, Grizzly Fox. He knows there's shenanigans afoot, Speaking of shenanigans, some cavalry. Are they going to get around here? Commander Gervais? Is he going to be able to get through quickly enough? The terrain making it kind of difficult, but he is. He's going to be able to get in and around. He needs to commit to this now. I mean, there's no way back. The Dunland spearmen are going to block his retreat. Is he going to have... Ooh, that's unfortunate. They're pulled back into melee because one of the riders was lagging behind just a little bit. Charging in there to the heavy goblin crossbows. Problem is, though, because they were already engaged in melee by something else, they didn't get their lances down. More friendly fire there, actually, into the heavy goblin crossbows than hit the riders there from the Angmar's troll hunter. Or was that the troll shores? I mean, he's got himself into a pretty dangerous situation here, Commander Gervais, because now he's stumbled across the Blackback Mountain Berserkers who were hidden, and you don't want to be staying in melee with them for any length of time at all if you're the Knights of Anubis. You can see how quickly they started to fall, with some javelins and axe throwers in there as well. Commander Gervais needs to use his cavalry wisely now that he's here. It's been a bold move to get this far, but I mean, he can go after the catapult. There's still the matter of the snow trolls in front of them, but I mean, you can kill those trolls with cavalry, especially a unit of knights like the Knights of Anubis. Time will tell whether he is successful in his endeavours. Keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, still it's more of a skirmish here. More of a genuine siege, as they continue to try and poke and prod at their enemies. Here, the Royal Court of House Armlaith from MSQ2 potentially going to sally out. I mean, it's only Dunland spearmen, so a good charge into them might cause them to break. They're going to be able to crack right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good charge there. Meanwhile, over here, we arrive just in time. The snow trolls actually. He must know, Get Wrecked, that snow trolls, they don't really want to take the Knights of Anubis head on without any sort of help, but also the Knights of Anubis don't really want to charge in, because as soon as they stop charging, as soon as they're stationary, the trolls are a far more dangerous foe. I mean, the thing is, the snow trolls are quick. Like, they can hunt down cavalry. In come the lances. Yeah, one of the trolls does get caught by the charge, but that's not too... Definitely players that know the game. I think a lot of players would just throw their trolls into that engagement, and a lot of players would probably just throw their cavalry in without thinking as well. But you can see the thought process of both players there. And I actually think that the Misty Mountains player did come out on top of that. Only one troll fell, but a few more of those riders did. And so far, I like the boldness to get the Knights of Anubis out here, but they haven't really done anything of note yet, which could prove to be more of an issue as the battle goes on. The Royal Court of House Armlaith also took losses, so at this point the Arthedain investment into all their heavy cavalry hasn't really paid off, to be honest with you. And that may continue, because MSQ2's Knights of Anubis have been revealed as well, so Grizzly Fox's caution. Combing the woods out here has proven to be a good move, but he's now not going to react quickly enough, as forced into action MSQ2 is going to use his Knights of Anubis to charge into an exposed unit of Rhudaur marksmen. Obviously not a particularly expensive unit, not a high profile target, but still it's practically free damage at this point. But so too are those really devastating volleys from, I believe, I mean, there are the troll... Was that the Reforged javelins that threw a volley, as well as the troll shores with those like streaks of white? Reforged javelins are a very good unit to have in this situation. The Knights of Anubis still, I mean, they're not going to get to the catapult with the snow trolls here. And now they're going back into the heavy goblin crossbows as well. So, I mean, he got his cavalry out here, Commander Gervais, and then he didn't really have anything to do with them. And as a result, I mean, they're going to get last samurai'd here by the trolls. And they're still, I mean, he's still going to try and get some value with them, but again, the dream is over for the Knights of Anubis at this point, and that's big in this fight, because both Arthedain players invested decently into their cavalry, and it's a lot of money which hasn't really given anything back on their investment so far. Commander Gervais has a second unit of rangers, however, which is always going to be a welcome sight for defenders. There's some Witch-Roman slavers leading the Rhudaur host. What are they going to do? I mean, there's nothing they can do around here other than maybe take in the view. I mean, there's a lot of forces over here. Being closer to the back of the settlement often means, by coming this way, not only is it a really nasty position for archers, but also it's probably where more of the elites are. Just on average, it tends to be true. And our Dunland Trollslayers from Commander Gervais charging in now. see the javelins at their side, those big axes, and they're going to easily be able to carve their way through what remains of the Scourge Raiders, which is basically nothing, and a very flimsy unit of Angmar halberds that they had in support of them. So more orcs killed. Meanwhile, a bit more of a genuine assault going on over here as well. There's still support coming in from the archers and the crossbows, firing into the Arthedain pikemen. Another unit of Arthedain pikes coming in. These Rhudaur swordsmen managed to get a little ways in actually before they were inevitably stopped. This arm-lathe cavalry, however, is very, very weak at this point. Only 6 riders remaining. Pikes, though, going to be able to turn back the tide of Dunland, spearmen and Snaga that are coming their way. But javelins, crossbows, arrows, finding their marks here. They do need to be careful here. I think there's a little bit of a sluggishness about this defence so far. You can see over here now that Angmar committing forward a few more impressive units, including the mighty Blackguard, backed up by Witcher-armed pikemen. So the Troll Slayers are going to be able to do a bit of damage initially, but eventually the Blackguard's quality is going to be too much. I mean, there's some crossbow bolts coming in there, that could be enough, but also a lot of support. I mean, could be a good opportunity to kill those Blackguard off. This is also, I think, the first domino falling, really. What have we got? Rhudaur not too eager to advance through this canyon of doom at this point. Mercenary crossbows and Arthedain marksmen ready. But Grizzly Fox needs to be prepared to start moving in sooner rather than later, I think. From this side as well, Half-Orc Baneguard from Dunland starting to pick up the slack on the front line as the Dunland spearmen start to fall away. Trollshaw Axe Throwers doing some damage as well. Trollshaw Axe Throwers will be excellent against Arthedain pikemen. Unshielded infantry like this. Yes, they have the armour upgrade, but that's not going to be enough to save them from sustained fire from those Trollshaws. And this is the problem. I mean, they've committed to this fight at this point. It's a lot of pikes they've got on this front line. Kind of need to double down, and that's what they're doing. They're sending forward some dismounted Fornos Array Knight, more unshielded units, more units that really the Trollshaw Axe Throwers will be all too happy to see. Dunland Troll Slayers still with their javelins at the ready as the bells ring out across the city. Stay in your homes. Oof, you can see here, I mean, clearly what's happened here is the Witchers have been making a nuisance of themselves, because that's a lot of dead peacekeepers. Where are the Witchers? I must admit, well, there they are. That's something else. You need to keep something in the bank to try and deal with those Witchers. They have a shot into them? Maybe they do, but that could have been the target that Commander Gervais could have tried to hunt down with his cavalry out there. I admit I forgot about it, but forgetting about the Witchers is a dangerous business. Angmar will always try to leverage that if they can. Meanwhile, it does look as though Grizzly Fox is ready to start making his move into the settlement as well, or at least he's thinking about it. He's got his Rhudaur marksman kind of inside. Most of these arrows unfortunately are going to hit the cliffside though. Some of them will find their marks, but even so, in a straight up skirmish, right, the Arthedain marksman far the superior of the Rhudaur marksman. There's a second unit of Dunland Rangers from MSQ2. Going into the red limit in a siege like this, 3v5 on Rangers, is definitely worthwhile, I would say. Maybe not everyone do it, because then you start to sacrifice too much of your upfront strength for holding the line, but we've seen in the past it be brutally effective with units like the Wardens of Alos Tyrion in the defence of the Grey Havens. And so it could be again here. We shall have to wait and see. Trollshaw Axe Throwers scurrying towards the front line. Dunland Rangers and Peacekeepers moving forwards. There's a lot of Dunland Rangers actually. It's the second unit from both MSQ2 and Gervais. And another unit of Dunland Peacekeepers will come to the front line. I mean, this is ideal. It's a massive blob. So Rangers would be mad to not shoot into them, although I really thought he was just going to charge them in them, which would have been a real problem. But also the Dunland Peacekeepers against mostly lower end troops. That's exactly what the Peacekeepers are going to be really good at killing off with their higher attack scores. We can see there immediately the attackers prepare for this. The attackers have had time to get set in this position, and they're immediately going to start counteracting the Rangers with their axe throwers. This is a big problem actually for the defenders. They've been resting on their laurels a little bit, I would suggest. And yeah, the attackers have got things organised well. they have the defenders in a place where they would want them. They're still going to take a lot of damage over here, but they have the ability to do as they please to a certain extent. THARBAD Warhammers coming in here. Obviously, the presence of the Witches is making life a little bit difficult for the defenders now, because you can see there's a lot of dead THARBAD Warhammers on the floor here. But Witch-Realm Blackguard being engaged by Wardens of the North and the Warhammers, and the Angmar assault is actually looking like it's going to start breaking down. The Witches have been engaged in melee and they are dying very quickly, so I mean the Witches have clearly been a problem, but they haven't been devastating, and the defenders are going to gain the upper hand over here, especially with the support of some marksmen in the back shooting into those pikes. THARBAD Warhammers, Wardens of the North, and another unit of Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers getting into position. So yeah, this is all good stuff here for the defenders, and Angmar don't have the numbers like the others do to keep up this assault for the same length of time. So this is the time where I'd be looking on Grizzly Fox and saying, you know, now is the time. We don't have the luxury of waiting around anymore. Yes, you're going to take losses, but you just need to get yourself in there. Waiting around is going to achieve nothing, and also you're already taking damage anyway. These Merc crossbows are slowly doing some damage to these Rhudaur Berserkers back here. Really the only attack that's going quite well actually at this point, I would say, is the one in the north of the settlement. The one that Dunland and Rhudaur are putting on, because they are making progress here. They wanted to support with rangers, but they couldn't do so unopposed here, the defenders, which might mean they have to let the attackers in and reposition themselves where they have the upper hand. We shall see. I mean, there's a few pikes left on the line. You can see actually the Dunland Peacekeepers have done some work here on this flank. They're starting to push back against the attacking horde. But elsewhere, the numbers are getting a little bit out of control. There are Bane Guards starting to seep into the settlement now, which is not going to be a good thing for the defenders, because they're doing quite well on the other flanks, but the integrity of the settlement is starting to be compromised a little bit. The Rangers should probably start shooting in, to be honest with you. What we've got back here, routing pikes. Riders of Orthanc are still there and still in high numbers. It's less useful for the attackers in a settlement like this to have cavalry in the late game, and the Riders of Orthanc are crossbows, so you can use them first and foremost, and then use them to go after the gaps which will appear. And at this point now the Rangers are isolated, they're stuck. So this is a fantastic catch here. MP Beckamy is going to be able to engage with his Bane Guard. The Bane Guard will be defeated, to be fair, and they might even rout pretty quickly with shots like that heading into them, but can they rescue those Rangers? Those Rangers still have ammunition. Like, they could be the difference between victory and defeat here for the defenders, and they've been rather clumsily lost if it proves to be their downfall there. Ones to the north are on their way over. I mean, that is the saving grace here, the fact that they should be able to commit over some reinforcements from over here. Lalande still has his Dunedain Rangers left, Ones to the north, and Arthedain Marksmen heading over. I mean, I say that, this isn't really a huge force on the front line. I mean, the THARBAD Warhammers are strong, but between the pikes and spears, they're just being overwhelmed, and now the catapult's being pushed through. They might have used up all their ammunition earlier on, and they're just trying to put some artificial holes in this defence. Yeah, they're going to need those crossbow bolts to do the vast amount of heavy lifting here, and actually the Dunedain Rangers are out of ammo, so they're going to be committed to melee. This does allow, I think, Cardolan to hold this line, I think. Over here, meanwhile, Get Wrecked is now also moving in. I was wondering where his Misty Mountain support for Angmar went. It went over here. He's going to be pressurising this choke point. I like it. They've had sort of a rather disjointed approach to it, but I do like the fact the attackers have started to pressure every angle of the settlement, because you can see the fact that the defenders are kind of struggling to hold everything together, especially in the north, but the more pressure is put onto these places as well, it's going to get more and more difficult. Black Uruks coming in, a unit of Arthedain men-at-arms blocking the way. The Dunedain captains could be committed forward. If they are, then the Black Uruks will very quickly find themselves on the receiving end of a beating. Well, another unit of Dunedain Rangers moving forward. I mean, this... yeah, you can see the Trollshire axe throwers. I mean, the Dunedain Rangers are putting on a pretty brave last stand up here, but it is ultimately going to be a last stand. I don't think there's any saving these Rangers at this point, and even if you do, they're such a small unit that the DPS is going to be rather low indeed. And the Trollshire axe throwers going to be able to finish them off. More arrows from the back from the Arthedain Marksmen. I mean, it's not Ranger ammunition, but it'll do. And I have to say as well, these Dunedain Peacekeepers have done a really good job here Exactly the sort of unit which Dunland are going to really not like fighting off against, because they're really good against hordes of trash when they're supported properly. Also, with the dismounted Knights of Annuminus here, you have just that ideal solid core. The gatekeepers at this point, or gate guards I should say. Annuminus gate guards are very damaged though, so it's kind of a mixed bag. It's been a pretty poor situation for the defenders, but they have at least tried to make the best of it. Arthedain marksmen doing their thing. Meanwhile over here with the support of the rangers and the support of the crossbows, it's a bit of an even fight to be honest with you. Neither side is going to come out of that looking too rosy, but the defenders will take that I think, considering the low amount of resources they have there. And yeah, with the support of the Dunedain captains, these Arthedain men-at-arms are very quickly started to do damage. In come the Goblin King bodyguard though. Dunedain captains should have what it takes with support, especially if those the Annuminus gate guards come over and support. They should have enough to block the advance of the Goblin King's bodyguard, to be honest with you. They're a strong unit, but they're not exceptional in the way that some other bodyguard infantry are, and there's also still the matter of these Troll Slayers. A lot of Dunedain on display today. And this is a little bit more like it. So Grizzly Fox is moving in. It's not that convincing of an advance, to be honest with you. There's not everything that he has at his disposal. At least I don't think so. I would hope not. Otherwise his army's in real trouble. He still has his Rhudaur berserkers out here, mercenary crossbows. I mean, he will lose back here, but these are resources that he is taking up. The Dunedain captains and the Knights of Annuminus will take... Oh, that was a brilliant shot there by the Trebuchet. It's very close, but a nice shot there into the Trollshore axe throws, doing damage. Grizzly Fox will run out of steam, but his units will do damage. Ones to the north coming across, some more Dunedain peacekeepers, so some strong infantry units should be enough to turn the tide very heavily in favour of the defenders. But over here, the attackers are in the ascendancy. Pharaoh and MP Bekami were both the biggest armies left on display, so it's not too surprising to see them put on the best show towards the late game. There's also some Angmar units over here, some Scourge Raiders. Arthedain Rangers still active, Ettenmore's Troll Hunters. The Cavalry is doing its best to try and hold back the tide for the time being, and now, well, killed by one of the remaining axe throwers, unfortunately for the Cardolan general. I mean, it's interesting now, with the scattered nature of the defence, this is where the Riders of Orthanc could prove to be a really, really important tool. The Rangers finally been dragged down, but they lasted a long time. Angmar have been dragged through the mud. Arthedain and Cardolan successfully managing to finish them off. Mercenary Guildsman still alive. Over here, meanwhile, I mean, yeah, the Black Uruks. What happened to the Goblin King's bodyguard? Were they pulled back out? I can't imagine they stayed in there. Oh no, maybe they did. Yeah, they did. They got ruined actually by the Dunedain captains. That's surprising. I thought they put up a better display. With, oh, actually, there was some pike support in there as well. Yeah, things have happened since last we came. So yeah, the pikes were committed and then they were retreated. There's some coloured shields from the Ettenmore's Troll Hunters in there as well. Troll Slayers. It's all a little bit chaotic at this point, which should favour the attackers, generally speaking. But here you can see this Rhudaur force has been well and truly turned back. Rhudaur berserkers. Ferodrum javelins actually aren't routing, it just looks like they are. Both they and the Rhudaur berserkers are still alive. Will MSQ2 insist on pursuing them outside the settlement? Could make them pursue them too far. Enslavers being overwhelmed by the dismounted Knights of Annuminus. There goes Azog. So yeah, the goblins lose their general. Dunedain captains slaying them. Scourge Raiders in there as well. I mean, you can see actually that the full force of their attacks actually going down here towards the front end of the settlement, first and foremost, towards the eastern side. And I suppose that's understandable, considering I mean, there are Warns of the North here, but most of it is Arthedain marksmen, which they can definitely overwhelm, and it does deprive the defenders of more numbers that they can use to stand in their way in a more organised fashion toward the summit of the settlement. Black Walls are in there, but I mean, Warns of the North don't go down easy, especially with their rather healthy unit of Gate Guards. What remains of the Tharbad Warhammers are going to join in as well. Their AP won't be all that useful, to be honest with you, against pelt-wearing savages, however. This could be pretty grisly, however. They've committed to this fight, the defenders, and very wisely Pharaoh has got his axe throwers and his Arthedain rangers into a very nice position. The axe throwers will do damage, but it's the rangers that will really take their toll. And this could be a pretty decisive moment in the battle, to be honest with you, because those pikes in particular could have been saved. And that could have been an important unit to have in the late game, but instead, really nice position there. And they're going to double down. Like, those 22 Dunland rangers are going to be committed as well. They won't last too long though. Devastating damage that from the attackers. I have to say I quite like the way the attackers have played this game as well. I don't think this has been a game where anyone has played too badly, but I do come back to what I said earlier on, where I've seen games where the defenders have played well, but what ultimately cost them the game is poor conservation of their resources, and I think they dumped far too much ammunition early on into low quality trash, and now late on they really don't have ammunition left to deal with some scarier units like the Riders of Orthanc, like the Reforged javelins, the Rangers even, the Arthedain Rangers. They have nothing to counteract that with because they dumped their ammunition too early, and that could end up be the thing that ends up costing them this battle, to be honest with you. But it's fair play. I think the attackers have also done a pretty good job at sort of baiting that sort of thing out. So can't complain too much. These Dunland captains have chased the enemy just a little bit too far for my liking. And now Grizzly Fox and a few goblins. I mean, there's not really much left of the attackers over on this side of things now, to be honest with you, but there's still enough here that they can definitely make a nuisance of themselves. And what do the defenders actually have remaining? Some wardens. Well, there you can see the Reforged javelins doing some damage to another unit of the Numinas Gate Guards, and yeah, you can see at this point the defenders, they are going to retreat to the very summit of the hill. You can go all the way up here if you want to the ruins at the very tippy top of the hill, but yeah, I mean that choke point is all well and good, but the problem is the range support is in favour of the attackers at this point. I don't know if these Troll Slayers still have some javelins, but even if they do, it's going to be a very limited amount. If you had a unit of rangers still in the back pocket in the late game, like the one that was sent up here to die, might be a different matter, but it's not. I mean, they do need to retreat to the top of that hill, to be honest with you, because if they don't, they're just going to get hunted through the settlement by the Riders of Orthanc. Arthedain men-at-arms routing off. Not sure what the attackers are doing at this stage. Some catapult carcasses just lying around the settlement at this point. So yeah, I think the attackers from here should probably go on to win. I just think the support is going to be too great. I mean, if it comes down to just sheer martial might in melee, it might go in favour of the defenders. They still have that tread, which, yeah, the tread is something I maybe didn't consider. It's going to be close, but I think from here the attackers should probably take it. It's how it often tends to go. Let's go up to times 6 speed, while the attackers trip over themselves as they bungle their way through the settlement. Dunland captains as they retreat. Let's go, attackers. Well, I mean, yeah, the Riders of Orthanc, of course. In the world of mounted crossbows, there are only 2 units, the Riders of Orthanc and the Mercenary Crossbowmen, and it's not even close between the two as to which is the best one. Yeah. Very clear end to this fight, I think. The battle as a whole, however, that is a different matter entirely. Dunland Spearmen as well, helping out against the Mercs. Just having a look at the composition of this defence. So, Merc Guildsmen, not all that impressive, to be honest with you, will probably rout. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers, who still look to have some ammo, but their presence may be needed to help hold the line. Back here, it's a very weird defence this. They need to put all their infantry at the front. Are they going to go the Game of Thrones route and put their trebuchet in front of their defences? If so, then they deserve all the scorn they will receive. Come on, lads, let's go. This is going to be one final hurrah. Now that suggests that maybe the trebuchet doesn't have any ammo left. It has a very limited amount of ammo, to be sure. That rotting meat is probably not going to cause these orcs to rout either. Time 6 in this, because they've danced around one another enough. The time has come. to stop skirmishing and engage in good old-fashioned fisticuffs here from the top of the hill. And there's nowhere else for the attackers to go. They have painted themselves into a corner here, so I wouldn't actually blame the attackers for squeezing every last bit of potential out of their own skirmishers that they can. It was a bed the defenders made, and now they must lie in it. They are back into the corner of their defence, and now they must fight for their lives. Dunedain Troll Slayers, capable of doing a lot of damage, but so too are the Black Wolves. It's going to come down to numbers, I think, here, and I don't think the defenders have got enough. The support from heavy Goblin crossbows, Arthedain Rangers and Trollshore axe throwers as well, I think puts this beyond them, but I've been wrong before. Many times. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus, and well, a nice settlement. It'd be quite a nice place to live if it wasn't being currently ransacked by orcs and savages. Dunedain Troll Slayers here, pushing the enemy back down the hill. Some Dunland Spearmen are arriving, but that won't be enough to stop the forward momentum of the Dunedain. Heavy Goblin crossbows are actually wavering, so the attackers are making a bit of a pig's ear of this, actually. They're not really attacking in a unified manner. I mean, the defenders have got 1% more kill. What's happening? I mean, why have they still got units way back here? Why have they still got Frontline Berserkers just loitering around doing nothing? Whitram Enslavers just hanging out doing nothing? These units are needed on the front line. The time for caution has passed. Everything is needed. All hands to the their stations. If you don't, I mean, Wards of the North are in there now, backing up the Mercs. You don't want to throw this lead away. I've criticised Pharaoh for being a little bit too on the back foot in the past. Trebuchet does still have ammunition as well, so that changes the complexion of this fight entirely. If the attackers end up losing this because they were too conservative in the late game when they should have been a little bit more arrogant about things and just crushed the enemy underfoot, I think they'll be very disappointed in that. As you can see now, the defenders really sallying forth, really carrying the momentum, perhaps sensing the weakness in how the attackers are approaching this late game here. With all of their lower quality units, a robust charge from all of the high tier Dunedain from Arthedain, backed up by the Mercs from Cardolan, might be enough to break them, to be honest with you. There's still the matter of the Arthedain Berserkers to try and deal with. Some Spears of Orthanc are still here. They can't chase them too far because then they leave themselves open to charges from the Riders of Orthanc. And I think Dunland have actually played this battle very well. Dunland only really have one modus operandi, and that is we will overwhelm you with sheer force, and I think MP Bekami has probably displayed that most of all among the attackers, to be honest with you. And we've got here Blackbacks, which are Scourge Raiders. I mean, all of these throwing axes are presumably finding their marks. The Riders of Orthanc, though, getting right in and amongst things over here. The Mercenary Guildsmen are wavering. They'll want as many soldiers to stay in melee as they possibly can muster here. Cardolan's Manatar Roman Gatekeepers moving forward. Peacekeepers and dismounted Knights of Illuminus routing axe throwers. I mean, this is the thing, like, they're being routed off piecemeal because they haven't committed all their units all at once. There are units still cowering at the back of the settlement. Pharaoh, what are you doing, man? Every game, it seems, that I see with Pharaoh in it, he gives me cause to be mean, and I don't want to be mean. The Scourge Raiders are doing some good work, but at this point the Berserkers are just going to be outright overwhelmed. And could it be this ballsy counter-attack, sallying out? Ride out with me. Ride out and meet them. That is kind of what this could end up being here. I mean, there are Enslavers down there. Arthedain Rangers are going to do some damage, sure, but they don't have quite the same terrain boosts that they had before. An Arthedain General does fall, albeit in melee rather than to the ranged units. Those Scourge Raiders are not going to stand up long without some serious support, and they have serious support. That's the thing. They have Enslavers they could use, which would be really, really good against some of the higher armor units in here, like the Dismounted Knights. What happens to the Blackback Berserkers as well? I mean, they're still in here, but they're like scattered at this point. They were moved in more in desperation, and they've been caught cold a little bit. Down the hill go the Dunedain Troll Slayers as well, chasing the Attenmore Shot Hunters up. They're up to charge speed as the forces of evil cower. 22 Guildsmen routing off. That's a bit of a shame. Every man counts at this stage in the battle. But the most important thing Cardolan have to offer are the Manatar Roman Gatekeepers with that nice AP damage that they deliver from their halberdiers. I don't know, you know. I think that maybe, looking at this, the defenders might go on to win this, actually. I mean, crossbows, it's going to have to come down to a lot of a big spike in damage, I think, for the attackers. So, I mean, in terms of just sheer quality, is the trebuchet still operational? Doesn't look like it. No, they abandoned their piece, so it's just the crew at this point. They may as well be committed, to be honest with you. 3 berserkers. In terms of sheer quality, like I said, I think the defenders will have it at this point. It's going to have to be range pressure, but Ferodrum javelins moving in. They're a little bit more exposed now, I suppose, for Pharaoh's javelins to go after them. So maybe the attackers will still win. There goes a Rhudaur general. That was Grizzly Fox's army, though, I believe. There's still 1 rider of Orthanc. Same general's model as Rhudaur have. Going after the Dunedain Troll Slayers would be a bit of an undertaking, but they are actually, you know, they're distracting the Witch Realm Enslavers. The Enslavers were probably needed on the front line, to be honest with you, because that was where some of the heavily armoured targets were that they'd be really good against. So too are the Blackwolds, but they're a little bit less impressive than the Enslavers are. And at this point, I mean, this is a brilliant last stand from the defenders if they go on to lose. But it could be that they also go on to win. The Trebuchet crew, I mean, that's surely got to be the end of the Dunland general there. He's being poked and prodded by the pikes, but he manages to wriggle free. Cardolan berserkers and Ferodrum javelins being thrown in by Pharaoh. I think they're just running out of steam here, the defenders. I think they're just running out of steam. And it is coming down to the range support. It's stuff like the Attenmore's Troll Hunters and the Rangers back here, as well as the crossbowmen from Get Wrecked, that is causing the problem here. Like they just don't have the numbers anymore to be able to pull this off, because they're going to take losses from those sources, and in the end it's not going to be sufficient for them to dig their way out of here, unfortunately. Because I was pulling for them in the late game there. I feel as though we were this close to glory, but it's going to be close. It's going to be a very close battle, in fact. But in the end, I do think evil is going to seize what, for this battle's purpose at least, I'm calling THARBAD. Thematically, it feels right. Arthedain moving forward. There are the riders. Dunedain. I say that, dismounted Knights of Illuminus, although I suppose they are Dunedain under that armour. Putting on a brave showing, but in the end, this smattering of evil men is going to be what remains. And a few goblins as well. But that is going to be that.
Our army is tiring.
Are they going to get shot? Or are they going to get smashed? Smashed it will be. Heavy Goblin crossbows completing the surround. Well, excuse me, allergies, you know. Well, well, well. This was definitely a high quality battle, I would say. Probably one of the better examples of a battle I've seen on this map, to be honest with you. The very first one I did on this map, which I was actually a part of, was good as well. But since then, the battles I've shown on this map have been like kind of alright, but not brilliant. This one, however, was of high quality, which I'm very glad of. So then, we can start talking about the business of summarising this. I think because there's just one dismounted knight in there, and he has just fallen. There we go. Couple hundred left, celebrating their victory. Yeah, I do think this battle ultimately came down to the fact that the defenders were just too eager to use so much of their ammo, so much of their high quality ammunition early on. And yeah, I mean, they played quite well, I think, actually, the defenders, especially late on. I was really rooting for them to win as they counter-attacked down that hill, but they left themselves quite a lot to do, to be honest with you. And I think the attackers played it very by the book. You know, they went in, skirmishes first. They went in with a reasonably low quality first wave, and they were successful in baiting out all of that ammunition. And then from there, their second big offensive was a little bit more involved. They crossed the bridges in the north as well, forced the defenders back to their settlement, and at that point it was always going to be quite difficult, I think, for the defenders to seize the initiative back when they had less resources to use. But yeah, I do think I'd like to get. I think MP Bakami deserves a lot of credit as well, because he was playing Dunland and he played them well. He and Pharaoh's assault in the northern side of things was always going to be the most significant one. And I do think another major stumble was the fact that Arthedain couldn't get those rangers into position to start really doing some good damage. They didn't necessarily need to be up on that hill exposed to the axe throwers. They could have just been in this street here where the arrow cursor is shooting in. It wouldn't have been as devastating, but it still would have got the job done. And in that situation, that was pretty key, because they lost a unit of rangers without really losing any volleys from them, which was very significant, considering one unit of rangers could easily mop up that remaining blob over the course of a battle. But let's see what did the damage for Lalan's army, the Cardolan force, who was primarily crossbow based, but he too actually did use too much of his crossbow ammunition early, I think. But his lines held up reasonably well, I think. Dunland captains did okay between them, but by the time they were being committed, it was already looking pretty grim for the defenders. Warns of Tirngorthad got shredded up by Scourge Raiders. THARBAD Warhammers had a pretty tough job on their hands holding alone against Angmar for a little while. The Minhiriath units did decently. Again, that was more of the initial defence, including the sharpshooter kills. The Rangers got over 400 kills, which is what you want. That is a decent amount of kills for a single unit of Rangers. But he also was a little bit more conservative with his ammunition. He didn't dump it quite so early. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the amount of kills that the Dunland Rangers got from the other side, but I think using one of their units of Rangers early was understandable. But I also think that at least one of them should have been saved till later, and that could have made a big difference. Menotar, Rom and Gatekeepers doing decently, of course, as they normally do. Minhiriath, mixed fortunes for them. But yeah, I think that was overall a high quality battle regardless. Big thank you to Lalan for sending this one in to me. Big thank you to all of the players for being a part of it as well. And yeah, I think the exams are actually coming to a bit of a close now. So we'll see. I mean, summer is sort of a bit of an unknown entity for me at the moment, so I couldn't really give any sort of long-term plans for what I'm going to be sort of setting out, but I've rarely put out any long-term plans anyway, if we're being honest. I sort of go as the do what I feel like, to be honest with you. And yeah, obviously continuing forwards, probably do another Reforged replay. Obviously I have been meaning to do some more Silmarillion, but that's something which will develop as it will, I think. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.